Assalamualaikum, this is Mohammed Kashif and I'm going to show how my tracker application works for COVID-19. So in the main entry point, I have a my drawer component which contains some JSX for the drawer navigator, and the drawer navigator further points to a stack navigator and a bottom tab navigator. So my stack navigator actually contains all my screens here and it points to the first screen indirectly. So the first screen we get is the COVID-19 tracker screen, which we see right here. And the bottom tab navigator is only available in the continent screen, which we will use at a later time. So this is how we nested the navigator so that all our data is available. So let's look at how the start screen works. So in my start screen, I have some list items here which contain date names of countries, and when I click any of these countries, we get data for that country. So here we see that the drawer navigator is still available to us, and if we go back, this text input is actually acting as a search bar for us. So if I type IND, we see that we get 3 country names, and if I remove IN, we get 4 country names. And this is done by conditional styling so that all of this data is filtered through a couple of utility functions that we have for our JSON data. So in this screen, we see that we're getting some JSON data from the link we've provided, and we're using some hooks to change these entries in the list input, and we're using conditional styling to make the images and the buttons available and disappear. So if I click India now, we get data for India. So this is how the screen works, and if we look at the country screen, which is actually displaying this data, then we have some hooks here as well. We have some loading hooks to make sure we don't access data before it's loaded. We have some, we are accessing this country name and the slug which we're using in our link through the params, and other than that, we're just creating some list items and adding data to those list items. So other than that, we have 2 more screens available to us, which are the global statistics. If we open the global statistics, then we simply get some list items containing data, and how the global screen works is very similar. We have some hooks getting our data and making sure that it is fully loaded. When this data is fully loaded from this use effect, we have this JSON converted into our arrays. Then we simply use the list item and some conditional styling to make this data available to us. So when this data is available to us, the global screen is very simple, since all it contains is an activity indicator and it is displaying the data that we've retrieved. And finally, we're left with the continent screen. So if we open the drawer and access, now this continent screen actually contains some bottom tabs: Asia, Europe, Africa, Australia. So this is giving us data according to the continents. So we've used a different API to get the data by continent. We've used params again so that we get all our data so we know these params are actually used to know which screen we are in, so that we can actually access data for that continent, since we have different screens for different continents in our bottom tab navigator. So we simply load the data into JSON, we add the data into separate arrays, and then we apply some logic so that we can add that data to our application. And one more difference here is, since we have a lot of countries, we've actually made a scroll list, and I've used the map function so that it creates a constant list of list items for us and updates the data accordingly. So that is how this entire application is working, and we can go back to our home here, click back, we come back to the original entry point of the app.